wanted to be better, but how can we be better when we hate who we are? I learned to realize that my thoughts and my feelings are based on my perceptions. These perceptions, they may or may not be true, but I have the ability and the right and the power to challenge them. I have the power to be the person that I want to be, and I'm shifting to being that person. Trauma didn't break you. Those painful experiences didn't damage you. You're not broken. You're wounded. And wounds can heal with the proper support.
Welcome to the Wellness Education Network. This podcast is brought to you by Wellness Productions Canada and is dedicated to providing you with the latest insights and strategies for mental health education. I'm Jamie Andrews, your host, and each week we'll explore a range of topics from managing stress and anxiety to understanding mental health disorders and promoting emotional well-being. Whether you're a mental health professional, a student, or someone eager to improve their own mental health, we definitely have something for you. Join us as we break down complex topics, share expert advice, and offer practical tips to help you thrive. Let's embark on this journey to better mental health together. This is the Wellness Education Network.
This episode contains material that may not be suitable for all audiences. This includes discussions about child violence and child abuse, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
All right. Thanks for joining us. This is the Wellness Education Network. My name's Jamie Andrews. I'm your host, and I'm happy that you guys are listening. It's nice to have an audience, and this particular project is about mental health and the struggles that people go through with their lived experience of mental health, and specifically the organizations and the skills and the types of therapies and the things they're using to help them manage their own mental health. And I have not a better guest than my very good friend, Coach Michael. He's got such a fascinating story of trauma to recovery and the amount of healing that he's been able to do and able to turn the tide from his start to where he is now, where he's actually built his own mental health coaching business, alignmentcoaching.ca. This is an absolutely fascinating story. So thanks so much for agreeing to be here, Coach Michael.
Thank you for having me, Jamie. It's an absolute honor to be able to be here on this episode. I'm honored.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you, and we're going to get to know you over this course of time and get to see the wonderful things that you're bringing. And I think the important thing is just knowing where to start. Let's just talk about your upbringing with your parents and see what that kind of looked like for you.
Sure thing. I grew up in a very violent, abusive home. My father was incredibly controlling, emotionally, physically. He tried to control us every way he could. But that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was the violence. It was brutal growing up. And growing up, I didn't realize that was not normal. I actually thought the way I grew up was normal, which was sad.
Can we talk about those hard times from that brutal time period, just so our listeners understand exactly?
Of course, yeah. I have no problem sharing. I just want to say for our listeners that this could be a challenging conversation for many. I am very open about a lot of the abuse that I went through. I also want to say that for some people, it can be frustrating. I want people to just be mindful of that. And if this is a bit overwhelming, feel free to take a break. Look after yourself because there's nothing more important than our own self-care. Take a break if you need to. Growing up, like I said, my father was very violent. I remember at a very young age, I'm talking about 4 or 5, 6 years old, him basically sitting on top of me on the floor and just punching me in the head as hard as he could. I would wake up as an adult from nightmares, feeling my head just bouncing off the carpeted floor from him hitting me so hard. There were times that he would hit me with any object that he had close by, whether it be a belt or a shoe or a chunk of wood. I remember I was around 8 or 9, somewhere around there. I knew he was going to beat me. So I took off running, and we lived near the lake, Lake Ontario. And I took off running to the lake, and he chased after me. And I was throwing rocks at him or anything I could to keep him away from me. He eventually got me and threw me face down in the sand, and he basically ripped all my clothes off of me. He just whipped me. And then he tied me all up and dragged me feet first on my back through a patch of thistles and probably about 100 yards or so down a gravel road. And I remember feeling all the gravel ripping on the back of my head, bleeding quite a bit from that. And for me, that was normal.
That's awful.
It wasn't
Yeah.
fun. Yeah. But one of the things that did help me
Yes.
through is I have a very warped sense of humor. Humor has always been a big part of how I've dealt with things and sometimes even avoided dealing with things. But yeah, it wasn't a natural way to grow up. It wasn't a normal way to grow up. And it wasn't a healthy way to grow up. And there were times, and a lot of times in my healing, I had to learn to extend compassion towards my younger self.
Mm. Yeah, it's powerful. Sometimes children, when they experience such tragedy and trauma, they have very strong negative emotions. Is that something that would be true of you? The emotions that you're feeling
Yeah,
growing into teenagerhood and young adulthood?
the biggest ones I had was the fear of rejection
Mhm.
and anger.
Um, okay. And do you say that they were related to what you're experiencing from your father?
Yeah. Angry at how I was treated, the way I grew up, dealing with all of that. Anger was the fact that he refused to take any responsibility. A lot of times when I tried to confront him for the things that he did, he would simply say, "That never happened," or "I don't remember." It could just be that you're making it up. It's some
Mm.
sort of psychological thing where you're just creating memories out of nowhere.
Oops. So were you talking to him about these things to get some reconciliation? What were the ages that you were at this time?
This is growing all through growing up. There'd be times that he would want or say something or do something, and I'd confront him on it. You'd think that he was just doing everything good. I think in his own mind, he might have even thought he was a model father.
Mm.
And when I tried to confront him on anything, he says, "Nope, that would never happen. That didn't happen like that," or "You're exaggerating." And so just a complete lack of honesty on his part, willing to
Yeah,
acknowledge anything.
it sounds like a form of gaslighting, right?
Absolutely.
Um, so you're experiencing this as you're turning into a teenager and becoming a
Mhm.
young adult.
Yeah.
Because you know that these things are true. And are you still living with them at this point?
Yeah. I ended up living at home until I was probably 23, 24, somewhere around there. The main reason was because I had a younger brother who was 5 years younger than I was. One was that I needed to take care of my younger brother. And I figured I have a responsibility to protect him so he won't be as screwed up as I am. It's not healthy to run away from problems. And I thought, okay, all this stuff happening at home was a problem. So it's not good to run away from it. It doesn't mean we have to keep our hand in the boiling water when we're being cooked alive. It is good to be able to remove ourselves from abuse. It's very wise, very smart to remove ourselves from abuse. But in my mind, at that age, I thought I was running away from problems and I didn't want to do that.
The other thing I just want to go back to is that you had a fear of rejection
Yes.
as a result. So let's just talk about that. So, how did this kind of upbringing instill in you a fear of rejection?
Well, let me just I'll share a little story. I remember I came home from school and I'd gotten like a B minus on a test. And I was really happy about it because I didn't study for the test.
Okay.
And so I came home and said, "Hey, I got a B minus on a test that I didn't even study for." Then the response was, "If you were smart, you would have studied and you would have got a better grade."
Oh,
And it's just that took all of the wind right out of my sails. No matter how well I did, it was never good enough. And I was constantly criticized, continually invalidated. Any thought or idea that I had that I was excited about, if I shared it, it was immediately ripped apart and flushed down the toilet. I basically felt like I was stupid. Anytime I did something wrong, it's, oh, you're stupid. Anytime I didn't live up to my own expectations, it's because I'm stupid. And so eventually that became my self talk. Every time I messed up or screwed up or didn't live up to my own expectations, I eventually started calling myself a stupid freaking idiot every single time. And that lasted for decades.
so then, so as a result of your hard upbringing, harsh upbringing, your trauma, absolutely, it's creating a literal narrative in your mind that I'm not valued. I'm an idiot, you know,
Exactly.
and any mistake I make is because I'm an idiot. And this is just going on silently in your head
Mhm.
because nobody has access to your mind.
Exactly.
But any kind of, so then it's really creating a closed mindset. Anybody with a closed mindset can understand exactly how frustrating it is. So what kind of frustrations were because now like you're entering adulthood, you're going into your 20s like this,
Mhm.
you have this mind, and human nature, in order for us to get better at anything, is to make the mistake and not do it again. I've increased my typing speed because of the mistakes I've made. I've improved this skill because of the mistakes I made. And you have a counter one that criticizes you, just you. And tell us about that.
Yeah. In my early 20s, I would see so many people that I went to school with, and they would be doing some really great stuff, like going to school and university and getting really incredible jobs and being in successful relationships. And I just felt I'm just too stupid to have any of that. I'm just too much of an idiot to do that. And I just thought, okay, this is just the way it is. I was in my early 20s. I was first diagnosed with depression. And I thought, okay, this is a life sentence that I can't beat. And this was in the early 90s. And there wasn't a whole lot of support for us back then in the medical system. And I was in a relationship with an incredible young woman that I had met at my church. And I was a complete jerk. Let me be more honest. I was a complete monster to her. I learned how to manipulate because my father was an incredibly manipulative person. I learned how to manipulate. I had absolutely no emotional self regulation.
Mhm.
And so, what I learned to do was to manipulate people around me. And I would use that to control my environment. And so I was trying to create a perfect little bubble where I didn't have to deal with anything.
Mhm.
And I hated myself for that because that's not the person I wanted to be. I knew I was making her like almost to be a prisoner. And I didn't want that. I wanted her to be with me because she loved me, not because I was forcing her to be with me. And so the self loathing became more intense. And I didn't know how to deal with that. So I created a more rigid bubble. And it was not a very happy chapter in my life or her life. But that's how I learned to cope.
Yeah, I want to make this connection that based on what you learn these behaviors because you're a kid, you have no choice, right? The narrative is this is what you've learned. This is how adults communicate. And for the people that are close to me, I'm just going to mimic what I learned.
Essentially, yeah. And it wasn't that I wanted to be that way. It's just I had no other tools available to me. And For many years afterwards, I would look back on so many things I did over the course of my life where I was, and I can be honest, I was a very toxic person for most of my life. And I'd look back at so many of the things that I did, the people that I hurt, and I would hate myself for that. And it was interesting because I wanted to be better, but how can we be better when we hate who we are?
Yeah. And especially if you don't have an example in your life that can help you
Mhm.
show you the direction that you want to go in.
I was fortunate enough to be around some really great people,
Mhm.
but the problem was I just did not know how to regulate my emotions in a healthy way. I remember going to see my first psychiatrist, and the first week I was there, she asked me, "So tell me, why do you think you have depression?" So I told her my life story, and then she gave me some medication. And the next week I went back. "So tell me, why do you think you have depression?" Like, "Didn't you write any notes last week?" And this went on week after week after week. And then after a while, I started getting a little frustrated. And so I asked her, I said, "Listen, I'm telling my life story every week." And it was very traumatizing for me having to relive all of those very painful experiences. And I knew why I was struggling with depression. And I told her, "I know why I'm depressed. I need to figure out what to do about it." And then she said, "I'm glad you finally asked me that. Next week, we'll start working on that." So I go there the next week. Guess what she asked me? "Why do you think you
Yeah.
have depression?" And it took every little bit of self-control not to get up and punch her in the head. I just walked right out. I never went back. And then I went back to my family doctor. I said, "I need to see somebody else." And he says, "All right, it'll take about a year and a half before you can see another psychiatrist." And I waited that long and I'm hanging on by the skin of my teeth. So finally I see another psychiatrist and I tell my whole life story. And I told him about this experience that I had with this other psychiatrist. And I said, "I need to figure out what to do about it. I don't actually treat people. I just do an assessment and then I refer you to somebody else." How long will that take? About a year and a half. At that point, I just figured there's no help for me from the medical community at all because the only thing they had to offer me was waiting lists.
Yeah. It's, and so, a year and a half to see this one guy after not liking your first
Mhm.
experience with the psychiatrists ends up in being another year and a half. So 3 years of your life while you're experiencing emotional like turmoil and despair
Or
and
or
darkness.
I described it to one person. I said, "Imagine feeling all the rage you could possibly feel and all the pain, all the rejection, all the hurt, all the anguish. And that's all going on in your brain at once. And then someone's getting a knife and just stirring it all up inside your brain all at once. That's what it's like to live with what I have to live with 24/7." And I said, "Even when I go to bed at night, every single dream revolved around me committing."
Yeah, it's awful.
And
And
I
and
lived like
and
that for years.
yeah, yeah. And so from a childhood, you're definitely feeling unloved,
Right.
right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, you're developing this self talk of I'm an idiot. Everything I do is wrong, which automatically creates hopelessness, right? Because now I'm an adult in my early 20s and I'm supposed to be doing something with my life. I have no love. My mind is constantly telling me I'm completely hopeless and I'm an idiot.
Mhm.
So I have no emotional regulation on top of that. Because of these things, I'm coming to very drastic conclusions like anger. I just can't. I'm just so angry at
Mhm.
anything and everything.
Mhm.
And so, how do I get a release when the medical profession isn't doing something?
Yeah.
And did you even know what you wanted?
Yeah, that was just it was just more like I was begging for help. I had no clue what was wrong with me. Alls I know is this is all this crap is going on in my brain 24/7, and I just didn't know what to do with it. And there was no one who was able to really point me in the right direction at all. And it
Yeah,
was so overwhelming, so
yeah, yeah.
frustrating, and so lonely at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, Are you, at this point in your life, are you able to make a connection and say, hey, listen, so and so, I feel like this and I feel like this all the time, whether it be a friend or a family, or was there somebody there for you?
Well, there were a lot of well-intentioned people around me, but they weren't equipped because, again, it was just 30 years ago. There was very little knowledge about mental health. A lot of very well-intentioned people at church said, I'll pray about it with you. And I had people saying, just think happy thoughts, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And then people saying, oh, you just need to learn to accept it. I mean, like learning to accept things, that's very important if you know how to do that. If you don't know how to do that, it's essentially almost like gaslighting.
Yeah. They have this giant piece, which is your upbringing, that they're missing. And you don't really want to talk about it with everybody and everyone. And even if they did know, how could they use that to help you heal? As well intentioned as it is, it's not a help at all for someone who's screaming in emotional agony and having these attempts to permanently leave this planet. Eventually, some way, somehow, because I know you, you began to heal. How?
I did, yes.
So where did that start and why did that start?
That started about 10 years ago. At that point, my youngest son had just moved out. I was a single parent at this point.
So if I can just fill in the gaps quickly for the audience, and just go back to the point where you mentioned that you met a woman, you were unkind to her as a result of being equally brutal in your mind to yourself. This woman, is it fair to say she became your wife or did someone else
No,
become your wife?
no. So that girl that I treated horribly, she gave me a really, really powerful gift. And that was that she basically put up a boundary and says, I'm not dealing with your anymore. And she went no contact with me. And I struggled and I manipulated her as hard as I could. And I'm so thankful that she stayed strong. And so it took me a few months, but I eventually started like getting over that. And I became to stand up for a little bit more on my own 2 feet. And I'm thinking, hey, this is feeling pretty good because I felt a lot more empowered because I was forced to work through a lot of strong emotions. And I thought, okay, I'm doing pretty good. Not too long after that, I actually met someone who we married. Then we ended up having 2 kids. When my youngest was about 14 months, the marriage fell apart. I basically had to, in one day, I called up my boss and I said, listen, I need some time off of work. I got some family stuff to settle, to figure out. I got to go get custody and all that, or go to figure out custody and all that sort of stuff because she moved in with an extra neighbor. And I said, all right, I'm stuck here with the kids. I basically said, okay, I can't stay here. So I moved back to my parents' place, which was very challenging. And then my father wasn't happy to have me back, but my mom basically told him to shut up. He's staying here with the kids. Then I called my boss. I said, I need some time off of work. He gave me 2 days to get all my legal stuff sorted, or he would fire me. And I said, I quit because I knew I'd need more than 2 days. And so basically, in one day, I lost my wife, I lost my apartment, and I lost my job. I eventually got full custody of my kids, got in my own apartment again, and things were starting to work out, but I was still struggling with my mental health, struggling being a single parent. There was a lot of adjustment that needed to be done. And at that point in time, my mental health was so fragile that when I was raising my kids, I basically ended up with a goal that was that when my kids were old enough that they didn't need me anymore, I was going to commit in a way that it would look like an accidental death. So that way it wouldn't be as traumatic for my kids. And honestly, it wasn't a very healthy goal.
So eventually some healing takes place and now your kids are grown up.
Mhm.
You have this, you know, awful goal of choosing to leave this planet in such a way that it looks like an accident. And
Mhm.
now we have an empty nester, Michael, who's got some decisions to make. And what age would you be at this time when your healing is starting?
It was before it started, it got really ugly again because there was just so many
Yeah.
challenges. Because it said that it gets darkest before the dawn, but it just seemed, okay, when is the dawn coming? I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for it. And it never came or didn't seem to come. So, anyways, my youngest son was graduating from high school and I couldn't even go to his graduation. I was barely able to come out of my room.
You're in a dark depression. You're in a really
Yeah.
severe depression.
Yeah. I'm becoming more and more fragile. At this point, the house that I was living in had sold. And so my oldest son moved out and I'm struggling trying to find a place to live. And the only place I could find was actually end up being in the basement of a crack house. And
Okay.
I ended up getting attacked by the other people that lived there. And then finally I told my son, I said, listen, you either got to take me to the hospital or I'm going to walk out in front of a bus. And he was on his way to his brother's high school graduation and he had to make a detour to pick me up and take me to the hospital.
Wow.
And being in the hospital is never really fun, but they kept me safe. After I got out of the hospital, I was very fortunate. I had some really good friends who, from my church, basically said, Blair, you're staying at our place until you can get your own apartment. I stayed there for a month. And being around some really good friends who cared about me was very powerful. I couldn't understand why in the world would anybody do this for me? I'm a stupid freaking idiot. Why would somebody treat me like this? Why would they go out of their way to do something for me like that? And that's when I ended up getting some more treatment from an outpatient program at a hospital. And that's when I learned to start to challenge the story that I was telling myself. I learned to realize that my thoughts and my feelings are based on my perceptions. These perceptions, they may or may not be true, but I have the ability and the right and the power to challenge them. And so I started to learn that just because somebody calls me stupid doesn't mean it's true. And I learned to challenge that. I started to realize that if anybody's calling me stupid, they're lying. But that also includes myself. And I am lying to myself. Every time I called myself a stupid freaking idiot, I was lying to myself. And I had to face that narrative with something better. So,
So if I can just quickly interject here, it sounds like you have discovered by yourself the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy.
yes, I've never really looked at it from that perspective before until you brought that up. But um, when I started a day program at a local mental health hospital, one of the clinicians, he told me that you have the power to be the person that you want to be. And that blew my mind. And then from there, they said, okay, you have the power to challenge the story you tell yourself about who you are. And they taught us how to do that. And it's really powerful because they said, you know, you can talk, it's a 12-week program. You can talk as much or as little as you want. And we're not going to be able to explore everybody's stories all at the same time, but we're going to give you the tools that you can learn on how to manage your emotions, how to process them, and how to change the way you think, change the way you feel, and start to shift your perspective. And that was what all I ever needed. Like from 20, 30 years before that, when told that first psychiatrist, I know why I have depression. I need to figure out how to deal with it. And that's what this 12-week program did for me. It gave me a lot of tools that helped me become the person that I wanted to be. And then when that, right, so I learned a lot from there. And then I said, you know what? This is really cool. I have a lot more I want to learn. And so it just kept me on this journey of self learning. I learned different things that I wanted to learn. I learned that there were things that I didn't know, but I had to learn. And I just started to become a sponge. I learned how to apply it, which is very powerful as well.
Hi, friends. Thanks for indulging us in a moment of self-promotion. I wanted to take this time to let you know that the Wellness Education Network is created, produced, and inspired by people who have been touched personally by the effects of mental health. Even the music for our show, which was composed by M. Jukes. So if you're enjoying this content, we really need your help. We're just getting started, and we're excited to create new wellness education content for you. But what we need from you is we need you to like it. We need you to hit the download button. We need you to comment and subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us, and we're extremely passionate about wellness education. So if you're feeling extra generous, consider buying us a cup of coffee to help us out. This will help us continue to create the wellness education content that you like so much. You'll find the link for that in the description. And from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for being our friends.
Yeah, so you went from the learning stage to the application stage. What are some of the things that are helping you to heal? What are some of the narratives that are beginning to change in your head to set you in a new direction?
Like I said a few minutes ago, I learned that just because I think something, just because I feel something, doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
And so I learned to challenge those thoughts, challenge those feelings. And a lot of that was based on skills and tools that I learned from D.B.T or dialectic behavioral therapy. Learning that I can be in a situation and I have multiple options available to me, and I get to choose the option that would be most effective for me at that moment in time. I can use radical acceptance, or I could use wise mind, or I could learn to be more mindful, or I could just listen. There's all kinds of things that I could just do just to figure out what gives me the best option, the most effective option at that moment in time.
So this narrative that you're angry and unlovable, or that you're an idiot, you still have this mind, right? What's happening to this core dialogue of yours that you've held on to since 8 years old into your 30s/40s? What's happening in this dialogue? Because this is the dialogue that's motivating you and guiding you into these decisions and
Yeah.
putting you into these situations you don't want to be in. So
Yeah.
talk to us about your self-talk there.
Well, there was so many things that were happening. At this point, I started to look back at some of the things that I have done in the past, and I would be filled with so much guilt and self-loathing at the things that I had done in the past. And here, at that moment in time, I started to learn that, you know what? Most people would choose the best choice they have available to them at any specific moment in time. And even when I was in my early 20s, I could look at some of those choices that I made. Yeah, those were the best choices I had available to me. Even though I knew there were healthier choices, the capacity to make those healthier choices they were like doors that were locked and I didn't have a key to. But now I'm starting to get the keys that I can start unlocking these doors. And then I started to shift from hating who I was to starting to like who I was. Because the person I was, the root part of me was that I was actually a very kind, sensitive person. I wanted to be somebody that was lovable. I wanted to be somebody that people liked being around, not because I forced them, but
Mhm.
because of who I actually was. And so I started to learn to like who I was. And then I started to love who I was. And then that eventually led to me embracing my sense of authenticity, which means that it takes a lot of vulnerability to ourselves to be completely authentic. Because if I want to be authentic, it means I got to say, this is who I am, the good, the bad, the ugly, without bringing in all kinds of garbage, without bringing in guilt, without bringing in shame or self recrimination. Just say, this is who I am. I'm a mixture of good, bad, and ugly. I'm not all bad. I'm not all good. I'm a mixture of that. But I have the power to be the person that I want to be. And I'm shifting to being that person. And that allowed me to just say, you know what? If you don't like me, that's all right. Because I am enough for me. And that meant I didn't need to worry so much about whether somebody rejected me or didn't like me. or if I didn't live up to somebody else's expectations. And that was powerful. And it's something that I apply every single day in different areas of my life. And then I have to relearn because sometimes we become complacent with our self care and our growth in certain areas. And oh, crap, I forgot about that. I got to reapply it. And I can appreciate that instead of beating myself up for it. Just, oh, yeah, now I remember. I can do that again. And I can reinforce the person that I want to be.
Yes.
So you're kind of like learning a new skill set, but it's
Hmm.
more desirable to you,
Hmm.
which makes you want to continue in this new way, right? Eh,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because when we're learning new skills and new tools, it can seem incredibly foreign because, like, it doesn't seem natural to us, you know? But when we start to apply them consistently in small areas of our lives, then we start to see, hey, you know what? This is actually working. And it's all about a journey of baby steps. And one of the reasons I struggled with my mental health so often previous was that I would just think, okay, I'm doing really good. And I would just charge ahead as fast as I could. And then it's like a child running on an uneven sidewalk. They trip themselves up, they go flying through the air, they land flat on their face, they get all scraped and cut up. They don't want to get up for a while. They don't want to run for a while. And they learn that every time they run, they fall flat on their face and they say, you know what? I'm just going to stay right here. You know? But when we take baby steps, you know, yeah, we can stumble and fall. But you know what? A stumble and fall from a baby step is a lot easier to work through than it is if we are running like a bull in a china shop.
Yeah. I will say this from a psychology perspective, our brains crave traction. So whenever we're trying to do something new, our brains want a result. And so when we see that result and we like it, we want more of it. For people that are losing weight, and if you want to set yourself a goal, you need some kind of metric, right?
Mhm.
And when you have that metric, you're able to make decisions based on that metric as to how to improve. Should I continue the same? Because you're already starting. And so it makes it a lot more feasible to start these new kind of goals when you have a metric. And this metric is invisible to you, but it just feels better because you're kind of honoring like a core value of love,
Yeah. Mhm.
honoring a core value of friendship. And so you're like looking at these things and dusting them off and getting the dirt off there and saying, hey, I think I am lovable. Let's just add some more water on this love value that I have.
And I think it even goes a little deeper than that in the sense that at the root of who we are, I think every single person has the need to feel safe. And almost all the choices that we make in life are about trying to find things that make us feel safe. A lot of people who struggle with substance abuse issues, it's that same sort of thing. They're trying to find something that makes them feel safe. When I was younger, controlling my environment, controlling people around me is about trying to find a place that made me feel safe. But as we learn to accept who we are and learn to acknowledge who we are and what has happened to us and who we are today and who we want to be, that gives us a deeper sense of safety than trying to control everything around us. Because I've learned that control is an illusion. Only thing we can truly control is how we respond to things around us. We can't control our environment. A lot of times we can't even control our feelings, but we can control our attitude and we can control our choices that we make.
The only thing we really have control of is our behavior, which is
Yeah.
ultimately our actions, right?
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about some of the things that you've changed and the direction that you're going in now that you slowly over time have become a better human. What are you investing your time in now?
Yeah. Well, I'd just like to maybe say, I don't know if I'm a better human, but I think I'm a more balanced human. than I was before. Okay. But what I'm doing now is because I became so passionate about my own mental health recovery. I started working or volunteering as a mental health peer supporter. And it's a role that I love doing, and I still continue to do that now in much more limited capacity. But as a peer supporter, I started to realize that I can actually make a difference. I can encourage people. I love to encourage people. I love to support people. I can take the situations that I have gone through. I can take the things that I have learned and I can share them with others, and help them and support them on their journey and on their recovery. As a peer support, I started becoming so passionate about that. I spent some time exploring a Japanese philosophy called Ikigai, which is about finding your purpose in life. With that, it eventually dawned on me that I would love to be a coach. And I didn't know any mental health coaches other than me. I know life coaches, I know fitness coaches, I know business coaches, but I didn't know any mental health coaches. That's something that I want to do. And so that's what I started doing. And I called my business alignment coaching because not only am I very passionate about mental health, I'm also passionate about spiritual health. I'm a very firm believer in my faith. I'm very active in my church, and it's a huge part of who I am. And it played a huge part in my recovery as well. Being around so many kind, caring, passionate people, even if they didn't understand me and understand what I was dealing with, they were still very supportive in every single way they possibly could. And so I learned that when we can bring our emotional health and our spiritual health into a sense of alignment, the change can be absolutely revolutionary. And so when I first started my business, I called it the Alignment Revolution. That eventually became alignment coaching.
Mhm.
And so I'm absolutely passionate about it. I just love to be able to help people be the person that they want to be.
Mm. How does somebody help somebody else become the person that they want to be? Like, how would that happen?
There's a few things that I have to keep in the forefront of my mind. And first of that is I cannot fix anybody,
Mhm.
nor would I want to fix anybody because that means if I'm able to fix somebody, it's almost like I'm elevating myself at a higher place in the world or in life than somebody else. And how could I ever be so arrogant to think that I'm better than somebody else? I'm not better than anybody else. So I'm not there to fix anybody. But what I can do is I can support people. And so what I do is I spend a couple of hours just talking with them. I look at different areas of their life that they struggle with. And it could be things like boundaries. It could be how do they feel with their depression? Now, I can't diagnose anybody. Only a licensed psychiatrist or therapist or psychologist is able to diagnose. And I would never diagnose anybody, nor would I want to. But if somebody says, I feel depressed or I feel anxious, I say, okay, great. I have some tools that might be able to help with those feelings.
Mhm.
And so I support them with providing them practical tools that they can use. But what I normally start off with is I create with them what's called a roadmap to balance. And with that, I look at generally two or three main areas in their life that I think if we worked on this one area, in whatever that area is for them, and then a lot of times working in that one area can have a huge overflow impact in other areas of life. For example, if somebody wanted to learn about boundaries, internal boundaries and external boundaries, and how to assert boundaries and how to have healthy boundaries, very often one of the side effects of that is they become a lot more confident in who they are. When they start feeling a lot more confident with who they are, they might feel more empowered. And if they start feeling more empowered, they're going to feel less anxious and maybe less feelings of depression and more feelings of hope. And so just by learning boundaries, it can have a huge overflow impact on other areas of their life. And then I also look at things like core values, because I think core values are such an important part of who we are. We spend more time planning a vacation than we do figuring out who we are and what our core values are. And when we can look at our core values can also talk or point to, help us unpack what our boundaries are. Why are these boundaries so important to me? And then our core values can also point to areas like this thing here that this person did triggered me. Why did it trigger you? How does that connect with our core values? If somebody treats us with a lot of disrespect, if one of our core values is to be treated with respect, that's going to really hurt. We can understand the relationship between triggers and core values. And then we can start to unpack those triggers and take away the power away from those triggers. And then we can learn to actually appreciate the value of triggers. Triggers can actually tell us areas of our lives that we need to heal or we need a little bit more support in. Another area that I work on with my clients as well is creating a wellness plan. It's great when things are starting to go well, but if we hit a road bump, tragedy can happen and that can set us back. But if we can be proactive and say, when I start to struggle, what can I do to bring myself back up to a place of balance? How can I bring in people around me, my support system, to help me? What specifically can Bob do to help me? I may not trust Bob to help me with my banking. Bob can help me look after my pets. And it's about creating plans like that. My goal for all my clients is I don't want them to be my clients forever. I've seen so many people who have been seeing therapists for year after year, and they struggle just the same, if not more, than they did before. I want to set people up for success because I think we all have the right to be happy, but we have the responsibility to support others in their happiness. And that is how I approach my coaching practice.
It's quite remarkable to see where you come from
Mhm.
to where you are now. It's just proof that if we hang in there long enough and we continue to search and we continue to ask, we can come up with some kind of plan for ourselves that's much better than what we were taught.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's amazing, even as a mental health coach, I can still have my dark days. If one of my pets died, I'd be devastated. I still feel hurt just like everybody else. But even on a very dark and painful day, I can still wake up in the morning and say, you know what? Life is pretty damn beautiful. And it is so incredible to be able to say that. And looking back, when I used to look at myself and think that I'm so broken, I'm so damaged, I'm unfixable. And I have a lot of clients come to me sharing those same sort of feelings. And I'm able to say to them, trauma didn't break you. Those painful experiences didn't damage you. You're not broken. You're wounded. And wounds can heal with the proper support. And I'm not saying I can support everybody in every situation. I'm not that person. But the people that I am able to support, it's so humbling and empowering at the same time. I look at some of the people the way they were when I first met them and how they're living their lives now. And it's such a beautiful thing. Such a beautiful thing to be able to be somebody who was such a stupid freaking idiot to be able to say, you know what, I can support you. And so that wouldn't have happened without the people in my lives who supported me, my friends from church, the family that had my back, mental health professionals that actually instilled in me a sense of hope and optimism and empowerment. And it's such a beautiful thing to have people like that in my life. Like I said, we all have the right to be happy, but now I have the responsibility to help others to be happy as well.
You know, thank you so much for this time with you. It's been absolutely wonderful. I just want to ask if somebody is encountering that darkness, that mental health mud, that God, there's no hope, there's no way out. Where can they start to go? Where would they start to go? Are there
just a couple of examples that come to mind that can start their path onto recovery or onto healing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any words of advice there?
You're not broken. You're not damaged. You're wounded. And your wounds can heal with the proper support. And it might seem to be very challenging to find people that can give you that support, but don't give up, because it's so easy to give up just a little bit too early. If I gave up, it would have been a tragedy. All the stuff that I'm able to do now would have been a waste. And so if you feel like you you don't have any worth, you don't have any value, just because you think that, just because you feel that doesn't mean it's true. I do believe that we are all made in the image of God. And if we are made in the image of God, you have worth way more than you could ever possibly imagine. Find people that can support you. Just believe. Just one more step. Just one more step. Every step you take is a step closer to being the person that you want to be.
Yeah, I know Coach Michael, and he's become a very loving man. He's extremely passionate about other people. Considering that he came from a place of self-loathing and self-hatred is absolutely remarkable. To see him have that script in his head flipped is absolutely incredible. And it shows that if someone can do it, another person can do it. So I would just strongly recommend that if anybody is in that dark place and you really feel that today is your last day, please do not make that decision. At the very least, call 911 or 988 or your regional equivalent. But if you're not in that dark place and you're lost because you've got that mental health mud all over you, then go to Google and type mental health services near me. Type in therapists near me. Type in mental health coaches near me and start searching, because there's organizations and there's skills out there and people like Coach Michael and Alignment Coaching who are willing to help you. So I just want to wrap this up by saying thank you so much, Coach. If people want to reach out to you and check you out and look for more of what you're doing, where can they start looking?
They could go to my website, alignmentcoaching.ca. They could go to Facebook, look me up. It's called Alignment Coaching. Or you can go to my new Instagram account, which is Michael the Alignment Coach. Those would be the most effective ways.
Wonderful. We'll have those links in the description of this episode. Coach Michael, thanks again for taking the time out of your day to give us this powerful message. Thanks for being the Alignment Coach. You can find Coach Michael at alignmentcoaching.ca. And I want to thank our audience. Thanks for listening to one of our 3 launch episodes. If this is the first one, we've got 2 more coming. They should already be out. One is the introduction episode as to what you can expect every time that you listen to this podcast. And the other one is a mother's love for her son in regards to helping her son navigate the mental health system and find solutions. So, to our audience, I would just want to say thanks. Thanks for being awesome. Catch you next time. Bye. Thank you for joining us on the Wellness Education Network. This podcast is brought to you by Wellness Productions Canada. We want to acknowledge that everyone involved in this project, including the music, which was composed by Mike Jukes, has been touched by the effects of mental health. This series is dedicated to promoting mental health education and awareness. To find out more, please check out our website at wellnessproductionscanada.ca or check out our YouTube channel at Wellness Education Network. Otherwise, stay tuned. And thanks for being awesome.
The Wellness Education Network, brought to you by Wellness Productions Canada, provides general information and discussions about wellness-related topics. The content provided is not intended and should not be construed as professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have read or heard from the Wellness Education Network and Wellness Productions Canada.